Hi, everyone, and welcome to the session. Let me always share the presentation. For those of you who have just joined us, don't worry, you can still go back to the other presentations you've missed. Mark's opening and Beth did a really good keynote as well. That everything will stay on the platform, so you can come back, watch it at your own leisure if you've missed anything. But for now, I'm Ilana Koegelenberg, the co-founder of Atmosphere and the market intelligence manager. Now I'm going to talk about the natural refrigerant market trends. And as Mark mentioned before, we've got a new report out and we've got some interesting findings about the market and how it's changed, and also the business opportunity out there. So I'm going to be giving a few insights into that and some highlights that I'm going to be sharing. So yeah, I think Mark spoke about this as well quite a bit, but you might have noticed we've changed our brand a little bit. We're still Sheco, but now we really united all our different services and brands and offering under the Atmosphere umbrella. And the aim of everything is to scale the clean cooling economy globally and to really offer all our partners and end users and policymakers, everyone, just one-stop place for them to come and get help for whatever they need in the industry. So I think now it's also a bit easier to understand all the different things we're involved in and all the different ways we can help. So I think this is a nice infographic to also visualize that. So today I'm going to talk about the ATMO report. You'll see it here on the right, and a few other things as well. So yeah, this is the report. I'm actually very proud of this. It's taken a lot of hard work from the whole team globally to put this together. And it's our natural refrigerants market forecast, the 2021 edition. It came out September. It's actually, yeah. And it looks at commercial and industrial refrigeration in Europe, the US, and Japan for this year and beyond. And in the intro, Mark said, in his 20 years of working with natural refrigerants, he can unequivocally say that natural refrigerants have never had it so good. And he mentioned it in his opening as well, the industry is really booming. It's an exciting time to be in natural refrigerants and clean cooling. I think for so long, people were struggling to get the message, I guess, and always, now it's a bit easier. And thanks to COP and climate change, it really is, the discussion is always around natural refrigerants now. And it's nice to see the market finally moving in that direction a bit faster as well. So we definitely fighting on the right side as well, which is always nice. So when we first got going on this report, it was because we got so many market requests for market research on natural refrigerants. And there just simply wasn't a neutral source for this kind of information. There were so many reports out there, but it was hard to understand what was credible. And there was just so many natural investment opportunities coming up now. And there's a potential to scale up quickly for businesses and really capitalize on the natural refrigerant market. But the problem is it's such a complex landscape and it's not easy to navigate. So where do you start? And that's why we wanted to take on this extensive research study, because who better to be doing this than us? And also because there's a need for this. And that's where we started our global research effort. As I mentioned, we were very much uniquely positioned to undertake this because we've been doing this for about 20 years. And we have a core team of researchers, analysts, economists, journalists, engineers, and obviously the designers to make everything look pretty and easier to, I guess, digest. And we've all been working, it was quite a project, quite a lot of data to be processed and collected. And we also obviously leveraged our global network of more than 50,000 industry stakeholders, because it's one thing to have all the information that we've collected over these years and what we call Sheco-based. And it's everything from newspaper articles to event presentations, academic research. It's really just a database of all and everything natural refrigerants. And then we took that and combined it with our global network and did various outreaches and focus groups and interviews just to kind of have one resource. It's almost like, the golden book for, I don't want to go to any biblical references, but the golden stat, like a collection of all the information that exists, or at least that we could combine. And so we published this report in the 23rd of September. It's quite lengthy, more than 100 pages. And as I mentioned, it looks at Europe, the US, Japan, as well as globally, what do these sectors look like? What are the numbers? Where's the market heading? And we looked specifically at industrial and commercial refrigeration because these are traditionally the markets that are a bit more mature in terms of natural refrigerant penetration. There's more activity currently, there's more products in the market. And also that's why we looked at those regions, because that's where there's been most of the growth traditionally. And we specifically looked at transcritical CO2 hydrocarbons and low charge ammonia, because these are also the technologies that we've seen the most growth in. And then we looked at, as I mentioned, what the market looked like currently, like how many systems are in the market, and then also did projections until 2025 and beyond, even to 2030 in some extent, of what we thought, taking into account the different trends we looked at, the different market factors, everything combined. What do we expect the market, how would it perform until 2025? And we had also different scenarios to see like ambitious growth and conservative growth, and just really giving our perspective and estimations of how we thought the market was going to change. So the report is divided into two different parts, with the first one, as I mentioned, looking at the key trends that affect the growth of natural refrigerant systems. So we really, the numbers are one thing. I think people are always, they come to us and they want to know what is the number, how many systems are in the market, but without understanding the context around that, it's so hard to make sense of it without really knowing what are the trends, what is driving these changes, because the numbers can change so quickly. I mean, as we've seen with the pandemic, that's thrown such a spanner in the works for everyone. So everything that's numbers that's been projected previously obviously was completely off because of that. But if you understand the trends and the political trends, all the general trends, macro, micro, all of that, you can really see how the market's going to perform, even if you can't predict the exact numbers, because no one's got a crystal ball. So yeah, part one, we really looked at what is the economy doing, what is happening in the policy sector for each of these regions that we mentioned, and then also looking at like general trends, like what is driving the market, and then specific trends as well. So then part two, oh goodness, that is the part that everyone's always interested about the most, is the numbers. So we looked specifically for industrial and commercial refrigeration in those regions, like what are the numbers and how do we expect these to grow and where are they going to go? And then of course, we couldn't just leave it at that. We don't want to just look at today. We also want to look at the future. And that's why we also looked at beyond vapor compression. There's also a chapter on alternative refrigeration technologies, like what else is there that doesn't actually use natural refrigerants or any refrigerants? I mean, for us, we've always, as much as we've been advocating for natural refrigerants, it's actually natural refrigerants or no refrigerants. It has to just be sustainable, like environmentally friendly. So yeah, it came together quite well. I'm quite proud. Oh, just as a matter of housekeeping, I'll be taking questions at the end. So you can see at the bottom there's that live discussion box, so you can send through any messages. There's also a poll, but we'll get to that. So yeah, we'll get to that. Let me see. So as I mentioned, we started with looking at the trends, mainly interpreting them as in terms of drivers versus barriers. What is accelerating the growth of natural refrigerants and what's impeding the growth? I think if you can understand where these barriers and drivers lie, you can really understand the market and how to position yourself for better growth, but also how to overcome these challenges. You can't manage what you don't measure. So this report's very helpful for that. So the first section of the report really just looks at how is the market positioned today and how did we get to this point? And of course, a very important part and an important part of the discussion today as well is policy and standards. It is really the biggest driver and the biggest barrier for natural refrigerant growth in the US, in Europe, Japan, across the world, globally, really. It's always the carrot and the stick approach. Do you have you need the incentives to drive people to go to natural refrigerants, but you also have the stick approach. If there's policy and bans and restrictive standards, it could also move the markets towards natural refrigerants. but there's also restrictive standards that impede the growth of natural refrigerants, like the hydrocarbon charge limits. And we've looked at each different region, specifically its policy landscape and what's currently happening, and also looked at how this is going, what we expect it to change and the impact we expect it to have on the market. And for the US specifically, we looked, of course, at the AIM Act, Kigali's ratification, that's still pending. And then hydrocarbon limits is a big one. And then, yes, of course, what California is doing and how we expect that to, set an example for the rest of the country. But there's a policy and standards session later today. So please tune in for that for more detail. I'll leave that to the super experts on the topic. And of course, one of the key trends we looked at is competition from HFOs. It really is, it comes up almost daily. You'll see it on your social media feeds, news articles. People are being very vocal on HFOs. It's the new generation of refrigerants. It's the answer to all the problems. For every refrigerant, there's 10 different new refrigerants that will come out next year to be a replacement. But there really is a lot of concern coming out as well. And it's from reputable studies, like government-funded studies, like neutral sources, And as HFO usage increase, and as it continue to compete, increasingly competes as natural refrigerant, these concerns are also increasing. I mean, there's concerns over the TFA in fresh water, which could potentially lead to acid rain. There's quite a few studies on that, specifically for 1234YF. And then everyone says like, oh, well, but that doesn't apply to 1234ZE. But ZE, and during its production, it creates R23 as a byproduct, which has an incredibly high GWP. So it really is just, you're almost like fixing something, you're like plugging a hole and then creating a whole other drama on the other side. You don't really know what's going to cause what's coming next. And that's where it gets a bit scary. I mean, and I think the main message is it really isn't a future-proof solution to go to HFO. So they might, in the near term, pose a threat to natural refrigerants. But there's a lot of legislation also coming to that we expect to limit the use of HFOs. So I think that's why there's increasingly more interest in natural refrigerants, because it really is a future-proof solution. As Mark said, it's been tried and tested for many years. They have their risks and concerns. From each natural refrigerant comes with a risk, but also people have been working with this for many decades. People know how to address these risks. They know how to handle the toxicity of ammonia. They know how to work with the pressures of CO2. A lot of these new refrigerants that keep coming out every single year, who knows what's in them, what effect they're going to have in the long run, So, but yeah, there's also a very in-depth panel on that this afternoon later. So please tune in for that. It's going to be very interesting, where the experts will look more into the impact of refrigerants and how the long-term effects and what the research has been saying. So of course, I can't look at trends without looking at the pandemic. And we've covered it quite in depth in the report. Of course, when we started this, initially thinking of the study and doing the starting work of that, the pandemic hadn't happened yet. So we had to change a few things around, which you can't exactly ignore this. It has a massive impact on the market. And that's why we have a section on that. And we look at how it's affecting the natural refrigerant market globally, in Europe, US and Japan. And for each of the market sectors, it's different, because then each country and each region handled the situation differently. But what we are seeing is that there was slow demand last year. There was a lot of things were put on hold. People were hesitating, and that has led to the pent-up demand of 2021. It's been a lot of growth, and it's unfortunately led to some shortages, and people can't always keep up with the demand. And it's been, business is good, So I suppose that's a nice problem to have, but also the OEMs will adapt and they'll get quicker at delivering these products. But in the end, the overall impact on the market has been positive, the pandemic. Like I said, the OEMs in the EU and the US as well, they've reported massive increases in demand, some as high as 300%. They're having record growth years. I think also there's been a lot more visibility in the media. And I think a lot of it's like been around climate change and leading up to COP. And there's more and more interest in the mainstream markets in holding industries accountable and being more environmentally friendly and being more sustainable and future proof. And that's really kind of pushed the natural refrigerant and clean cooling agenda as well. And of course, another kind of trend we saw was how the move towards increased online shopping, which was already happening before the pandemic, but now to a much greater extent, it's changed the way that, especially in commercial refrigeration, how the value chain works, or how there's more, because more people are shopping online, there's not as many, you don't need as many supermarkets because people are buying stuff online. So you actually need more smaller stores and more warehouses to house these products. So it also means that we're seeing more natural refrigerants in small stores, and also in seeing CO2 move more into the light industrial sector as well, because there's now more new products being developed and more innovative solutions being created to actually cater for this market and the trend and the changes. So it's always been exciting to see how quickly our sector, adapts and capitalizes on these opportunities and comes up with new products and new solutions. And of course, Mark also mentioned this, training. It's very important because it can really be both a driver and a barrier for natural refrigerant adoption. It's people always use the excuse of lack of skilled technicians as a reason for not going natural. Oh no, we can't put in CO2 because who's going to maintain it? It's going to be dangerous. People don't know how to work with it. But firstly, also the pandemic has led to a lot more online training solutions. So it's making it more accessible. People are getting very creative with their ways of training. There's more like online videos and tutorials, and and we expect this to have a positive effect on the natural refrigerant industry because the information is just becoming more accessible. And to help this cause and to help promote the cause of training, we have partnered with a German publisher, VDE, to translate their German textbook, the Natural Refrigerants Applications and Practical Guidelines. And it was a pandemic, timelines, nothing went according to plan, but now it was worth the wait, because as we translated it and put the material together, all the authors just actually put in extra work and really just elevated the publication and made sure that we really covered all our bases for all natural refrigerants, to finally have like one neutral source written by all the academic experts on these are the different natural refrigerants, and this is how you work with them. So excitingly, we actually plan to have this textbook out, the online version, by the end of the month, early December, and then have the print publication available ready, early in 2022. So please have a look out for that, because this is also, like I said, it's very exciting. There's so many different courses, and once again, how do you know which ones are credible? And then there's like a bit here and a bit on ammonia, but this finally combines all of it, and now available in English as well. And then I don't know if you've seen this fact sheet that we released recently, actually, and it's got quite a massive response online. It was actually, I think we were also surprised. We're planning an update with the new IPCC 6 numbers, which we'll release soon. But it was very simply just showed the GWP of refrigerants over 20 years versus the GWP over 100 years. Right now, policy obviously includes looking at 100-year GWP for refrigerants, but most of these refrigerants stay in the atmosphere for much closer to 20 years and actually fewer years than that. So it doesn't make sense to look at their effect over 100 years. It's diluted. Of course, the GWP is going to look lower. So here you can really see, just from a credible source, putting the numbers next to each other, what is the composition of all these new blends and fancy refrigerants, and what is the actual GWP over 100 years and over 20 years. And you can really see, the picture becomes a bit clearer about the actual damaging effect it is having on the atmosphere. And also IPCC has actually changed the numbers a bit in the favor of natural refrigerants. All natural refrigerants have a GWP of 1 or lower. Even hydrocarbons has been proven to be less than 1 now, Whereas on refrigerants such as R32, the 100-year GWP is now 771. So it might have some challenges with upcoming legislation and no longer fitting underneath that bar. So it's very important to see what the numbers are and what the actual GWPs are, you know. So we also look, as I mentioned, at refrigerant-specific trends in the report. We looked at the hydrocarbon charge limits in different regions, because even though the IEC they've approved the standard, it still has to be accepted nationally in each country, or adapted and accepted. And then we looked at transcritical CO2 in warmer climates, something that has always, a lot of the time, also been used as an excuse for not going to CO2 everywhere. But now there's no reason that you can't have CO2 in every climate. I mean, I'm originally from South Africa, where it gets super hot and there's so much CO2 going in and it's running efficiently. So, you know, and that's also considered a developing country. So there's no reason not to switch. And like I mentioned as well, we're seeing more CO2 in smaller stores as well. There's more solutions available now. It's becoming more like cost parity, there's parity in compared to with HFC systems. We're definitely seeing an increase in low charge ammonia systems, particularly in the North America region, and even ammonia CO2 combinations, commercial refrigeration. There's we're seeing more and more case studies coming out of the US for that. So that's been an interesting development. So yeah, let me give you a bit of a sneak peek into the report and the market sizes. I think that's the part we always get the most questions about is the numbers. So let's see. Like I said, we looked at the current market for all of these, and then our projections for 2025 and then beyond. And we looked for commercial refrigeration. We specifically looked at transcritical CO2 and hydrocarbons. And then for industrial refrigeration, we also looked at transcritical CO2 because we are seeing more and more of these installations. I think that's one of the fastest growing applications we're seeing for CO2. And then we looked at low charge ammonia specifically as well, because I mean, there's a lot of ammonia in industrial refrigeration already. I think that remains quite stable. There's actually more ammonia going in, especially in the US, you know. Why? This is one case where something is working, so you don't have to fight with it. But low charge ammonia does give an opportunity for the countries in the areas where there are restrictions around the use of ammonia and higher charges, you know, for the traditional systems. So that's why we're seeing more low charge ammonia systems as well. So these maps, our famous maps that we've reported all over the years. So if you look at, we're looking specifically only at the US data now. For US, this was March 2021 update that we did with OEMs and our data collection. That the US is more than 900 transcritical CO2 systems. We actually expect it to be close to 1,000 today. So there's definitely growth in terms of transcritical CO2 systems. And then if you look at, we also looked at the penetration rate. These are the kinds of charts and graphs that we include in the report. So one of them, we looked at penetration rate. And I think, as you can see, obviously Europe is way ahead on 14%, but there's also lots in commercial refrigeration. There's more, thanks to the F-gas and sectoral bans, it's driven this market quite aggressively recently. But I think the important part to remember with this image is that we've looked at supermarkets and convenience stores. So if you look just at supermarkets, of course, the penetration rate would be much higher. But it's a bit, this far down in the race in the US is on a 0.4% penetration rate for commercial refrigeration for transcritical CO2. So the good news is there's still a lot of potential, and there's a lot of market share to be taken, but it is going to take some work. So yes, a poll question. I mentioned this before. You can check on your live discussion box that you would have there. The third panel would be for the polls, and you can go you can go take a question there and cast your vote. And the question is around what I just showed you now, the penetration rate for transcritical CO2 in commercial refrigeration applications in the US. As I mentioned, it's currently only 0.4%. And how we got to that is we looked at, these are the total amount of supermarkets and convenience stores. And then these, of course, these are the amount of systems that have been installed, transcritical CO2. So what do you think this rate is going to be by 2025? Is it still going to be less than 1%? Is it 1 to 2%, 3 to 5, or above 5%? Like, what do you think? Yeah, how positive are you about the growth? So have a look at the polls. Currently, yeah, a majority, 46% say selected the first option, selected 1 to 2%. So not too bad. And then in the second place, we've got 3 to 5%. So that's good ambition. Yeah, and 15% say we can go above, they expect above 5%. So that would be nice. I think it's achievable. But yeah, have a vote if you haven't yet. I'll have a look at the end of the session. So let's see, where were we? Aha, hydrocarbons. So we did a map for the hydrocarbon systems as well. I think the most important thing to realize here is that we looked at plug-in systems and commercial refrigeration. We didn't look at the light commercial sector, so no vending machines, no any of those systems, because then of course the numbers would be in the millions. So this was really like plug-ins and beverage coolers, like how many systems, and these are the differences for the transcritical CO2 data. Those are the number of installations, and the same for ammonia as how many systems were installed. And for hydrocarbons, it's the number of units. So how many of those refrigeration units we are currently estimated to be in the US? And we got to, close to 1 million already. So that's quite promising. If you look at the low charge ammonia as well, we expect there to be nearly 600 systems now already, which is America's doing quite well here. But of course, there's thousands more of traditional ammonia systems as well. But this is specifically just looking at the low charge ammonia systems, which is really, the new and exciting technology. So this is, the numbers and the data have been removed here because it's all in the report. But this is the kind of charts and graphs we have for all of those, the subsectors we looked at, so commercial refrigeration in each of the regions, and industrial refrigeration, and then also for those different refrigerants. So each of them like this, we would look at for the US, growth in transcritical CO2 commercial installations. And then you'd look at the blue line in the beginning shows that, the different data points for each of the year up until this point. And then the orange would be an ambitious projection, and then the green would be a more conservative projection. And then after this, we go into detail about the key trends that are affecting the market currently, and that how we expect that to change leading up to 2025 and also to 2030. And then use that to inform what we expect the market to be by 2025. So there's a lot of these charts and graphs in the book as well, in the report. So in the end, we processed a lot of information, so much data. We were crunching numbers, doing projections, all of that. And if you had to boil it down to one single sentence that really summarized what the conclusion was, it really is that natural refrigerants are here to stay and can be viewed as a good investment for any company looking to future-proof its business. Like, there really is a business case. As much as we want to do it because it's the right thing to do and it's good for the environment, and it really just, as people like to say, is a no-brainer, that's all good and well, but it also makes business sense. It's good for every company to actually go down this route. It's good to reposition yourself to capture these opportunities because the market is heading in this direction. We have proof of that. We've got the numbers, we've got the data. The question just remains, like, will you be capitalizing on that, or will you be left behind and then 10 years later go, oh, I should have gone in that direction? So yeah. And the report you can get on our new fancy website, atmosphere.cool. There's no .com or anything after it. It is not cool. And people attending today can actually get a 10% discount. Just use the promo code ATMO-AS21. Don't worry, it's not case sensitive. I checked, so you can have it capital letters or small letters or whatever you prefer. But yeah, go have a look. There's also more information on the website about it and what else is covered. And you can also download a table of contents to see just in how much detail we go. And as Mark also mentioned, we've got ATMO Connect, which is very exciting. And I encourage everyone who hasn't joined yet to go check it out. It's our Slack-based community, and we're actually almost at 1,000 members now, and it's really where our entire network from all over the world has joined, and we have regular meetups. We actually have a meetup tomorrow again where we have a chat on Zoom with different members about interesting topics and focus groups. And it really is like different channels and threads where you can ask a question, you can share news. Like, for instance, there's live reporting from this event today where all the presentations are shared immediately as well. And you get a whole lot of extra benefits like discounts for events, reports, and things like that. And it's become so much harder to connect with people, it's become so much harder to go to events, to be physically present, to just actually have that think tank of like people who, are on a similar wavelength, who care about similar things, who are the clean cooling industry experts and stakeholders. And with this network and this Connect platform, you can really now have everyone together and have those conversations. You can quickly send a direct message to someone in any country in the world. You can just quickly call them. You can make a quick video message. It's just really made the world a bit more accessible and better to connect, because that is really how we're going to take this cause forward. It's by actually working together and sharing great ideas and finding the synergies between different companies. There's more than enough work to go and projects out there to go around, so it really is about how can we capitalize on that and how can we work together. And yeah, so go check out Connect. You can also go to atmosphere.co and find a link for joining there. I think atmosphere.co, you can get a link to all our services and offering and really how we can help you to capture this market. So yeah, now it gets to the fun part, I guess, for you. For me, the tricky part, the questions. So as I mentioned in the live discussion box, it's there. But before I go to the questions part, let's go see how our poll is doing. Let me stop sharing here. Okay, so we're on, it's a tight one. 37% believe that it's 1 to 2%. Okay, so, and then second is 3 to 5%. So at least it's still ambitious. Only 6% believe that it's going to be less than 1%. So that's not too bad. I hope, no offense, I sincerely hope you're wrong, that the rate goes up a bit quicker, but let's see. Okay, let's do a couple of questions. Kimberly asked, in reference to the ammonia systems, whether it's segmented by industrial versus commercial applications. So for ammonia, we only looked at ammonia and industrial. We didn't separate by that. For the commercial systems, we only looked at transcritical CO2 and hydrocarbons because those were the most common. We do mention ammonia in terms of the ammonia CO2 systems, but we didn't really look at, to be honest, there's not a lot of ammonia in commercial applications. So we only really, it does exist, but we really only looked at the most common ones. Okay, good to see some more questions here. Okay. There was a question about the specific market penetration numbers for supermarkets. So yes, like I said, we do have the percentages of the market penetration because we do know how many supermarkets there are, and we know how many CO2 systems there are. But this was specifically, it was only on the CO2 side that we looked at market penetration. Lots of questions. If we run out of time, we'll get back in writing to the rest of you. But also don't worry, the questions and everything remains on the platform afterwards. What is the primary obstruction in the US market for growth of transcritical CO2 in the commercial sector? Thanks, Andy, for that question. There's quite a few things. I think we've identified quite a couple of trends and obstructions in the report. But I think, to be quite honest, people often use costs, like the systems are too expensive, which isn't necessarily true. They say there's no training, but in the end, the real obstruction is the lack of more ambitious policy. There isn't, and we could see it in the EU, really by having sectoral bans on a national level, and it would be in the US on the federal level, to actually have, bans. So bans and incentives are the greatest driver for natural refrigerants, and also the lack thereof would be the greatest barrier for it as well. So I think that's definitely one of the primary obstructions in the US. That I think also like end user awareness. A lot of the times companies just aren't informed about the different solutions out there. You use the same company you've always used, and they do things the same way they've always done. And I think that also leads me to the other point is people are scared of new things. I mean, even though CO2 isn't really something new, it's something that a company might not necessarily have done. So, and then without there actually being a clear incentive or a clear ban that's hindering from them putting in the old systems, it's not really going to change their minds. So there's quite a few things, but the good news is there's lots of partners and companies and doing good things to try and remove these barriers and help educate the market and make it easier to make the transition to natural refrigerants. And then the more companies there are working on this, you know, the more options there are, the more solutions, the cheaper it's going to become. And I think it always comes down to price, sadly. And a lot of the time, people look just at the capex, like what is this going to cost me up front, rather than looking at the entire life cycle cost. And how much is it going to save you in maintenance? How much is the natural refrigerant system going to save you in electricity use? So I think it really comes down to educating the market and all links in the chain, all stakeholders. Yeah, more questions, so many. Yeah. Whew. There's a link to the GWP comparison. Is there a link to the GWP comparison, or is that in the report? So I can share that to you in the chat afterwards as well. But that is in the report, but you can actually get the link for that fact sheet we have on atmosphere.cool as well. If you scroll to the website at the bottom, there's a section called knowledge, and you'll see the fact sheet is uploaded there, and you can freely download it and share it and see all those numbers. But I can share the link on here as well afterwards in the chat. So I'm just trying to see which ones I've answered already. You know, when you have to moderate yourself. There's a question of wondering if there are any global, regional, local incentive programs to encourage stakeholders considering and or participation for natural refrigerants. It'll definitely be helpful. Yeah, so we get this question a lot. We didn't cover it in this report, but there are definitely there are incentive programs available. I think last year during ATMO America, there was this session specifically on incentives and what's available out there. So that's not covered in the report, but there are lots of incentives available and different programs, but that's a whole topic for a whole other day. Thank you, Vainan, for sharing the link to the fact sheet we did. Much appreciated. We're going to run out of time quickly and then it cuts off and then it's going to go to the next session. So I'm going to leave you here. Apologies for the ones I haven't answered. I will get back to you in writing. We have everyone's details from the event, but yeah, enjoy the rest of your summit. There's going to be a lot of interesting panels today and we look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you so much.